Hi, John Wesley Bready. This Freedom Whence. The chapter Dawn Deferred, page 85. The plunder of shipwrecked vessels is indicative of the then prevalent savagery. Lecky records how ships off the Cornish coast were deliberately lured by false signals upon the rocks, and Defoe relates how a Spanish ship, observing the sinking of a British vessel and crew off the coast of Biscay, denied them any succor, its captain protesting that having been shipwrecked somewhere on the coast of England, the people, instead of saving his ship, came off and robbed him, tore the ship almost to pieces, and left him and his men to swim ashore for their lives while they plundered the cargo, upon which he and his whole crew had sworn never to help an Englishman in whatever distress he should find them, whether at sea or on the shore." End of quote. Wesley's journal, too, contains several references to this savage practice. In June 1760, for instance, during an Irish preaching tour, he recorded the following, quote, "A Swedish ship, being leaky, put into one of our harbors. The Irish, according to custom, ran to plunder her. A neighboring gentleman hindered them, and for so doing demanded a fourth part of the cargo. And this, they said, the law allows." End of Wesley quote. Professor G.M. Trevelyan pronounces Dr. Johnson, quote, "the most abnormally English creature God ever made," unquote. And so warm became the doctor's attachment to the metropolis that finally he avowed anyone tired of London to be tired of life. Nevertheless, there is more than humor in Johnson's couplet from London, which was written in 1738, the very eve of Wesley's world-stirring crusade. Quote, "Prepare for death if here at night you roam, and sign your will before you sup from home." End of quote. The drunkenness and inefficiency of the watchmen or constables, as many contemporaries point out, was notorious. Smollett, in his History of England, referring to the year 1730, says, quote, "Thieves and robbers were now become more desperate and savage than they had ever appeared since mankind was civilized," unquote. Footpads armed with bludgeons, pistols, cutlasses, etc. infested not only private lanes and passages, but likewise public streets and places of usual concourse, committing dastardly outrages even at times of day hitherto deemed hours of security. Often constables passed by a notorious robber, not daring to apprehend him, lest he give signal, and 20 or 30 armed villains rush to his assistance. In Gay's Trivia, that is in 1716, the lines, quote, "Yet rather bear the shower and toils of mud than in the doubtful quarrel risk thy blood." These are advice to London pedestrians never to squabble with street ruffians for the shelter of the wall, but to let them have it. As late as 1751, Horace Walpole, writing to Sir Horace Mann, complains, quote, "One is forced to travel, even at noon, as if one were going to battle," unquote. Then he has a final subhead, ICHABOD, question mark. But along with ignorance, lawlessness, and godlessness went superstition. That tyrant, King Quack, surrounded by innumerable votaries, many of them dealers in destiny's dark counsel, reigned over no small percentage of the subjects of George I and George II. And the fact that many of these dupes mouthed pretty phrases about deism, nature worship, natural religion, freedom, reason, and self-expression made them no less his slaves, that is, King Quack's slaves. W.C. Sidney says of this period, "The capital and provinces literally teemed with men and women who gained a livelihood by telling fortunes and casting nativities, and by the extensive sale of their ridiculous inventions called sigils, the possession of which was vulgarly supposed to avert evil and destruction from life and property." Among the social elite, superstitions gravitated towards the astrologer, the magician, the palmist, and the ever-present professor of weird natural sciences. Among the masses, whom the elite commonly designated the brutes, superstition assumed crasser forms. One of its most humorous manifestations is seen in the fact that Rural cockers took endless pains to have their game fowl's eggs hatched in a magpie's nest. For the magpie being the special protege of Satan, it followed that gamecocks so hatched would be devilish good fighters. Sir Robert Walpole, with bluff humor but grim truth, was wont to boast that he controlled George I by bad Latin and good punch. The country was controlled by a factious aristocratic oligarchy, addicted to bad morals and strong intoxicants, and the surest passport to the best society was to be a well-bred rake. True, the gospel of class hatred, a continental product, had not yet been propounded, but the chicanery of English class rule and the arrogance of English class privilege were, up to the middle of the 18th century, seen at their height. Among the masses, too, the publican and the pawnbroker, the kidnapper and the crimp, the bookie and the quack, the footpad and the highwayman paraded in the heyday of their power, till toward the end of the 5th decade. Indeed, it seemed as though when the century had run its course, its epitaph would be ICHABOD, for the glory of the land of Spenser, Shakespeare, and Milton had been ebbing away, and dawn was long deferred. Next time, Changing Horizons.